But first, I'd like you to meet a woman who's a stalwart of British politics. In her 44 years in office, she has championed some of the most significant policy changes in history. For example, she was the minister responsible for introducing the breathalyser and safety belts. But now her concern has turned to protecting people in a different way, as long-term state pension provisions come under threat. She's one of the few voices who are openly speaking against it. Now, I know you'll give an enormous welcome to Baroness Castle, but the nation loves her as Barbara. Just on this tea, if that's all right. Yeah? It is just so nice to see, a great pleasure to have you in our house. And I was just thinking, the nation just called you Barbara. Do you love that sort of term of affection?
Oh, yes.
Really?
I mean, total strangers stop me in the street and say, hello, Barbara. I like that.
Do you find it hard to use all the official titles?
Oh, I never. Don't you dare call me lady. I'd say, that's no lady, that's Barbara Castle.
That's lovely. Except when I think of you, I think of determination. I think of all that grit. I mean, the fact that you want to get things done. You've always been like that. Now, do you put that down to your background primarily?
Oh, I think so. I think so. I was brought up in a very politically conscious family, though my father was a senior civil servant and couldn't take any public part in politics, but he used to do it behind the scenes, you know. He'd produce good left-wing plays at our amateur dramatic societies locally, and he would... there was always a political discussion of some kind going on about local politics in our sitting room. You know, but actually, though my father was the great high-powered intellect, my mother was the indomitable little woman.
Really?
Oh, yes, I think I must have got, you know, my terrier-like quality, as I call it, from her, because she got her teeth into something, she wouldn't let go. And it was more by instinct, and, you know, she was like a tigress fighting for her young. She wasn't going to be put off.
But when you entered the House of Commons, I mean, let's face it, there were very, very few women there. You were going into this male bastion, if you like. How did you use your wily ways as a woman, or did you actually use them?
Well, not consciously. People, you know, chaps laugh at me when I say it wasn't me being a sort of using sexual attraction. They say, go on, Barbara. But you don't do it consciously. I mean, I've always been feminine in the sense that I love nice clothes. I like to look my best. But it's as much for me as for anybody else. And
you've always loved your hair being done nicely too, haven't
well,
you?
I like it nicely done. I've been blessed with a very thick, strong head of hair. But I'm too proud of myself as an individual ever to think, oh, well, if I flirt with this man, I'll get what I want. I think that's to demean oneself.
Of course, but on the other hand, you think subconsciously, at times when it suited you, that you did use your womanly powers to get your own way.
You're guessing, you see. That's sexist, Gloria. You know, she's just assuming.
And I've seen you operate. Even today, you still use those sort of lovely powers that you have. You
well, I'm using them on you, I hope. But, you know, it's not consciously going. I mean, there used to be a lot of rumours that Harold Wilson and I must be having an affair because he believed in women, he promoted women, and he promoted me 4 times in his various cabinets. And people said, oh, you know, must be having an affair. No. And you can imagine the sort of innuendos, just as the press tried to say he was having an affair with his personal assistant, Marcia. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't believe it. That was true. It certainly wasn't true in my case.
Did it irritate you, though, that you were being associated in that way?
Yes, it did, because, as I say, I think it demeans you and it demeans him. You see, he was very like my husband in that way, because he loved the company of women and he believed in women. He just... Harold used to love saying to me when he wanted me to take on a dirty job, he'd say, Barbara, you know, you'll be the first ever woman to do it. Like the Ministry of Transport. I didn't want to be Minister of Transport. He said, Barbara, you'll be the first ever woman Minister of Transport. Well, you know, that was his guiding motive. But he wasn't a womanizer. My husband was very like him in that way. Ted, if he went into a pub, couldn't bide it if there was nothing but a row of stuffy men stuck by there. And he wanted some feminine company, wanted a mixture. And that's what I've always wanted.
Now, you mentioned, you know, having obviously held very high office, like Minister of Transport. When you look back at the things that we accept now as common-day-place things, the breathalyzer, the speed limit, do you actually take a great sense of pride and say, well, I was instrumental in introducing that to this country? Changing policy, in other words?
Obviously, yes. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling, particularly when you can actually calculate what difference it has made to human beings. I mean, for instance, the year I introduced the breathalyzer, I got threats on my life, you know.
Did you?
Oh, yes. I got little torn off bits of envelopes with anonymous messages scrawled on. One of them was, "We'll get you yet, you old cow." and it was signed 3 regulars.
It wasn't signed from our producer last week, was it?
No, I don't think so. But, I mean, then it went on to say, "You ballsed up our darts match." Now, that was their word, not mine. I would never use a word like that. But that was the sort of attitude. But then at the end of the year, we found, my department estimated, we might save 200 lives in the first year. And when we found that we'd saved 1,200 lives, you know, nobody can take that away from you, ever. And you know, to think there were all sorts of people moving around and alive who might not have been. You know, but
that's very
if you can do something like that, it is satisfying.
Absolutely. Now, when it comes to this present government, of course, we think of you as the traditional socialist.
Old Labour, if you don't mind.
Old Labour, exactly.
Yes. Very
right.
old
Labour. But looking good on it, if I may say. But when you look at some of the policies there, like pensions that we're going to talk about in the programme today, where do you stand with Tony Blair's policies?
Well, I've been... it's difficult to say where I stand on it because they haven't pronounced it yet. They keep postponing it, but they've been dropping hints that they were going to break with the mainstream of the welfare state as far as pensions were concerned. And that I won't accept without a fight. And, of course, they said, oh, well, you know, there's a lot of ideological old baggage we've got to drop. I suppose they're referring to me. But, you know, we've got to, you know, have fresh ideas. We've got to have new, modern. But, you see, the biggest modernisation of the welfare state was carried out by me in 1974 to 6 when I was Secretary of State for the Social Services, and I brought the Beveridge report up to date. I introduced the state earnings-related pension scheme. I linked the uprating of the basic pension to the movement of earnings, of average earnings, so that not only did people sort of have the cost of living offset, but that they could keep pace with the rising prosperity of the nation. Now, that to me is socialism and old Labourism. But there were a lot of talk. There were some people who have quite openly been trying to drop the SERPs and to force people instead to invest a certain proportion of their savings in private pension schemes. Well, they proved an absolute scandal, most of them.
Well, actually, Barbara, that's exactly the subject we're going to pick up on. So, ladies and gentlemen, will you thank for me Barbara Castle, one of the greatest people to have on this programme.